I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he was in pain, and I don't know if he was, missing me. Was a really smart, silly, goofy little boy.
On the morning of January 11th in 2020, Roman Lopez was reported missing in a distressing 911 call made by his family, saying they believe he ran away from the house during the night between 12 and 6 a.m., resulting in a massive search effort by authorities and the community that didn't even last 24 hours. The police told the public they located him deceased, but were slow to tell them everything they knew. A little over a year after his death, police announced they made an arrest in connection with the case, being his parents, Jordan and Lindsay Piper, subsequently seizing their cell phones, going on to learn this man was a monster and had been preying on children in his home for months. This one gets dark and extremely disturbing, dealing with child murder and exploitation. If that is something that could affect you negatively in any way, please click off this video now. Welcome back to the dark side of life. Back on Friday, the 7th of March in 2008, Rochelle Lopez, who would often go by Shelly, was in the hospital after just giving birth to her precious son, Roman Anthony Lopez, whom she had with Jordan Piper. Roman was a bright child who quickly learned how to love, laugh, and have a great time with those that he loved. There really isn't much background information on the relationship between the two biological parents, Jordan and Rochelle, but it surely doesn't seem they were on the best of terms based on later occurrences and the fact I can't find any evidence they ever lived together as a family. Not too long after Roman was born, maybe a year had passed, and Rochelle was deployed on a tour in Iraq for an extended period of time. When she left to serve in Iraq, Roman would be placed in the care of his paternal grandparents, one of them being Jackie Farah. Jackie loved Roman and the time they spent together. They always had a blast, and he ended up living with her for the next 7 years of his life. According to Jackie, he loved to dance, he loved cars, trains, as well as playing video games when he got the opportunity to. He was a smart kid who was well-mannered, but he could also let loose and be his goofy self. After approximately the first 8 years of his life living with Jackie, Roman was getting ready to move in with his biological father, Jordan Piper, and his wife, Lindsay. Up until this point, Roman had the opportunity to see and visit his mother following her return home from Iraq. It's important to note that Roman and Rochelle absolutely adored each other, and they cherished any time spent together. Unfortunately, when Rochelle returned home from her deployment, she was dealing with a drug problem and health issues stemming from her time there. So when she returned home, she didn't immediately get custody of her son. At some point in 2018, while she was still trying to get custody of Roman, the custody agreement between Rochelle and Jordan that they already had fell apart due to the issues that Rochelle was dealing with, resulting in Jordan gaining full custody of Roman, taking him to live with him, Lindsay, and 7 other children in the home. If I understand correctly, the 3 youngest kids were foster children, and 4 of them were teenagers from Lindsay's previous marriage. The exact ages are unknown, but they were ranging from 1 to 17 years in age. Initially, when Roman first moved in with them, they were residing somewhere in Michigan, only for a brief period of time though, before the entire family would pack up and they headed to Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, they kept Rochelle and the other family members in the dark about their movements, making it harder and harder for Rochelle and Jackie to see and stay in touch with Roman, as well as it being less likely they are detected that way. Shortly after Roman moved in and the abuse started, Lindsay made the decision to pull all the kids from school so they could be homeschooled. Following that, the mistreatment just got worse as they began to intentionally starve Roman while restraining him. Roman's family members who genuinely loved him would basically lose all contact with him by this point. Jordan Piper was allegedly a lineman. For what company, I don't know, but he would be repairing, installing, or maintaining electrical distribution and transmission systems. After briefly being in Michigan and then Pennsylvania, the family would finally land in Placerville, California, where Jordan would be working on a job with a group of guys there. All the while, the house is a living nightmare for all the children in their care. Once all of her kids were pulled from school, Lindsay was no longer worried about staff or other students becoming suspicious of what's going on based on the health of her children. Many of the kids in that household knew the only reason she was pulling them from school was to protect herself, saying they were never even homeschooled. Less than 2 months after they started renting this home in Placerville, California, on the morning of January 11th, 2020, Lindsay called 911 to report 11-year-old Roman missing, claiming they hadn't seen him since the previous night, and they believe he ran away sometime during the early morning, specifically between 12 and 6 a.m. The call and information that Roman was missing led to a massive search being launched and attempts to find him. That morning, Jordan was already at work when Lindsay told him that Roman was gone, so he ditched work early at around 11 a.m. to come home and help look for him. Hours later, while the search is still underway, Jordan would inform his coworkers about the situation and send them pictures of Roman, so a large number of them left work and started to help authorities by searching through the surrounding areas. All the dumpsters, people's sheds and garages, everywhere just looking for the child. Authorities conducted their own search in the house, woods, anywhere that he could be, until around 10:30 p.m. the same day. It then was announced that Roman had been located and the search was called off. However, the public had little information to begin with, not knowing any details surrounding his death, and the police were not quick to release it, saying, quote, "There is very sensitive information that if released could jeopardize the investigation."
My mom and my sister and a family friend, and they sat me down, and my mom, she said, "It's Roman." But I wasn't able to even look at the article until today, and I didn't even read it in full. My family read it to me when I saw the missing posters. Why didn't anybody let me know? Like, so many different stories out there, and I don't know what the truth is, and I want to know. I want to know what happened to my son. I want to know what his final moments were, why he was where he was. If anybody knows anything, any little thing would help.
The following portion of this video contains the details of Roman's death. It is distressing and not easy to listen to. On top of that, you will learn the ways in which Jordan Piper targeted and then abused children in his home in repulsing ways. Now's the time to back out if needed.
I'm checking dumpsters and sheds and garages and walking through the woods with a flashlight looking for a missing 11-year-old kid, scared to death of what I might find.
While investigators were searching the Pipers' home for Roman, they made their way into the basement, where it seemed they just had stuff packed up in different boxes and storage bins, thoroughly going through everything down there until they opened up one of the storage bins and found the decomposing body of 11-year-old Roman Lopez. His bony, dead body had been jammed into one of these storage bins and then hidden in the basement for an unknown amount of time. It eventually came out that Roman had suffered physical torment for the vast majority of time he spent with Jordan and Lindsay, up until he died. When Roman was found, he weighed around 42 pounds, which is in stark contrast to what an average 11-year-old boy would weigh, being roughly 80 pounds according to the CDC. Later came to light through previous medical records that at the age of 9, during his last doctor's appointment he ever had, he weighed 61 pounds, nearly 20 pounds heavier than when he was found deceased. This was due to them intentionally and slowly starving him, not allowing him any food or water, and when they did, it was water that Lindsay had already tampered with in attempts to poison him. What exactly she was using to poison him I don't think was ever released, but she was putting it into his only source of drinking water, leading to him being extremely malnourished and dehydrated throughout his final days alive. A few of the other boys in the house, being Lindsay's biological children, witnessed a lot of what she put Roman through, which they said was filled by anger and hatred, such as times she would zip tie one of his arms above his head and then shove him into a closet or a box and force him to sleep like that, or she would just do it during the day and leave him there for a brutal amount of time. If he wasn't thrown into a closet for the night and he actually got to sleep on his bed, he would still be restrained with zip ties and unable to use the bathroom if he needed to. Not only did Lindsay attack and beat Roman on many occasions, she forced the other children to participate in the tormenting as well. They themselves would be threatened with further violence if they didn't comply and join in on torturing Roman. One of the boys would later come forward with this revelation in the case. With him being starved, dehydrated, poisoned, and beaten every day, his body started to give out on him until he was emaciated and failing to thrive. Neither Jordan or Lindsay ever made the decision to get him medical help, and instead just watched him suffer until he died. When his organs finally gave out on him and he perished, they stuffed his malnourished body into one of these storage bins, took it downstairs, and hid it somewhere in the basement, quickly coming up with the idea to just call and report him missing.
This was a very sad story, and I don't know what promulgated the whole thing, but something definitely was going on, probably for a long period of time, with that little guy.
What they're accused of is kind of unfathomable.
With the couple saying they were completely innocent and had nothing to do with what happened to Roman, it would be further investigated while they remained free. It wasn't until more than a year after his remains were found that both Jordan and Lindsay were brought into custody. Roman was found deceased on January 11, 2020. The duo wasn't arrested until February 4th, 2021. Why did it take so long? I have no idea. But initially, they were only charged with child abuse and torture. Lindsay was the only one to be charged with poisoning the drinking water of Roman. Jordan would be the only one hit with an additional charge of failing to provide food, clothing, shelter, and medical attention to the boy. Then finally, 4 months after being arrested and slapped with these charges, the charges of murder in the second degree would be added to their counts, which they would plead not guilty to and were set to stand trial for their crimes.
Inside the courtroom, Jordan and Lindsay Piper appear virtually from the El Dorado County Jail. Sitting side by side, the couple didn't look at each other once, only glancing up from their hands to answer the judge with not guilty pleas.
The charade of being innocent and not intentionally starving Roman didn't last long, and Jordan would change his not guilty plea to a guilty plea, while Lindsay would change her not guilty plea to a no contest in May of 2022. She was scheduled to be sentenced just a few months later in July. While the Placerville Police Department was investigating the murder of Roman, they would seize a digital camera and several other devices from the home. Following that, the FBI obtained a search warrant for Jordan Piper's devices and found a mountain of evidence that he was sexually exploiting a girl under the age of 18 that lived with him in 2019 and 2020. They found that Piper had made, quote, surreptitious recordings of a girl under 18. Saying they found over 430 images and screenshots of said victim that were taken without her knowledge by a hidden camera. Other videos that investigators found on his phone depicted the hidden camera placed behind the wall outlet in the bathroom of their house. Piper would position this camera in such a way that it would maximize the possibility he would catch this victim's genitals on camera. More videos were found on the phone that had been recorded between October 4th and 5th, 2019, of said victim using the restroom, bathing themselves and other children. Also finding a video that was recorded a few weeks later on the 19th of October in 2019 that showed Jordan Piper removing the hidden camera from behind the wall outlet in the bathroom. It's clear this victim lived with Piper for a while, as later that year in December, he would send this girl a number of sexually explicit text messages from the 16th to the 24th. Those messages were concerning a sexual Christmas gift. In subsequent messages, he offered her $250 if she agreed to use it. This is all according to the affidavit filed by the FBI. These screenshots and videos that were recovered by investigators were found stashed away on his phone, some being located in a secure folder that he had on his device. The documents say these incidents occurred between October 3rd, 2019 and January 9th, 2020 in the counties of Tulum and El Dorado. Although these cases are completely separate, the exploitation case was a byproduct of Roman's murder investigation. In federal court, Jordan Piper would plead guilty to sexually exploiting a child and was sentenced to 15 years behind bars and has to register as a sex offender for life, with an additional 7.5 years of supervised release if he makes it out of prison. Jordan Piper was set to be sentenced on November 21st, 2023 for second-degree murder, torture, and failing to provide. After pleading no contest to her charges, Lindsay Piper would be convicted and sentenced on July 8, 2022 for murder in the second degree. She was handed 15 years to life in prison in the California Department of Corrections, meaning she will be eligible for parole in just 15 years. Keep both of these animals in prison. They slowly murdered an innocent 11-year-old boy, victimized and exploited a minor for a sickening amount of time. They do not deserve to see the light of day and rather should feel what it's like to be slowly murdered, brutalized, and starved.
I'm glad that she got the maximum. I think that's what she deserves because she did an awful thing and she needs to pay for it.
It was incredibly brave of these two boys to write out statements against their mother and have them read out in the courtroom. Her son Carson wrote in his statement that Lindsay has been telling lies for years. Mind you, he is only a freshman in high school, so he's still pretty young, telling his mom he's hoping she never makes it out of prison. He also laid out the fact they were never homeschooled, and the only reason they were pulled from school was to protect her and avoid anyone becoming suspicious. His statement further read, "I participated in the abuse. I never found the strength to tell the truth. Maybe if I would have, Roman would be alive." Which is heartbreaking for the other children to feel this way because of their mother. Having to witness someone you care for go through that, on top of being forced to join in on hurting them. While court was in session and their statements were being read aloud, Lindsay would not look at or in the direction of her sons, Jackie, or any other family for that matter. Instead, she just sat there, emotionless, staring ahead of her, listening to what was said.
I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he was in pain.
Rewind back to January 12, 2020, when authorities publicly announced they found Roman deceased and released his death was suspicious. The police didn't notify Rochelle that her son had been murdered. Rather, she had to find out in her own way, and that's brutal. She was constantly looking for answers, traumatized by the fact that her boy was gone, and she wasn't there to protect him. In the following days and weeks, she barely slept at all and was demanding to know what happened to her son. She hadn't seen him in nearly 2 years, and at the very least, wanted to be able to see him, bring him home, and say a proper goodbye to him. Hearing the pain in her voice is devastating, and you can hear how genuinely hurt she is regarding the situation.
I didn't deserve this. And I wish I could have been there. Maybe I could have stopped it. I told Roman that I would, do everything I can to be with him again. He deserved a mom who is worthy of him. And that was the last thing I was expecting to hear. And I told Roman that I would always love him and I will always fight for him. But that was the last time I ever even got to talk to him.
A little over a year after Roman's death, and a couple months after the duo was finally arrested, in April of 2021, Rochelle Lopez would be found dead in Wisconsin. How she died and the details surrounding her death have not been made public. That's all that is known, and the remaining family members have asked that the public respect the family's privacy. Rochelle was 34 years old when she passed away, and there's no doubt that losing Roman the way she did took a massive toll on her, as losing a child is one of the worst things that can happen to someone. Sadly, she was never able to see any justice for her beloved son Roman. Losing Rochelle before they saw justice for Roman was further detriment for this family. There were a great number of people who loved Roman and the kind-hearted kid he was. He was described by many as silly, compassionate, and extremely thoughtful for an 11-year-old boy. According to his family, he loved trains, cars, and dancing. And I can't forget about swimming too. He was a stellar swimmer who could spend all day in the water. Rochelle would call him a little water bug. It's good to know he spent the majority of his years and birthdays with good family who loved and cared for him, watching him grow into the warm person he was. His life was cut way too short in a grotesque way, something he never should have endured. Over a year later, while waiting for justice, the world lost Rochelle Lopez, who was described as a strong woman, a hero, a fighter. I feel terrible for her family and what they've had to experience over the recent years. Roman and Rochelle loved each other, and I hope they're reunited out there somewhere. Rest in peace to Roman Anthony Lopez, who passed away on January 11th, 2020, and Rochelle Lopez, who passed away on April 4th, 2021. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for today's video. If you made it to the end, go down to the comment section and comment death penalty for both so I know. And if you want to, you can follow me on Instagram at Robert Clausen with 2 N's. If you have a story suggestion, DM me on there. I think that's all I have for you guys today. Again, I truly, truly appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.